Robin, this is a very exciting, shall we say, moment for me, or at least a beginning in terms of being able to discuss with you something that I think is of such great importance to us as African people, particularly those of us in the diaspora. As you know, over time, in the last 500 years, we've been disconnected from our roots. We've been disconnected from who we have been. We came to this so-called new world with nothing, but only our memories in terms of who we were and what we were. And over a period of time, to a very large extent, that was beaten out of us. We were dehumanized in the process. So we ended up not only not knowing our history, but in some sense being disconnected from our humanity. And again, a very extensive process with so many violations of us as human beings in terms of human dignity and what we are into us in terms of our day-to-day living. Obviously, to repair that damage, it's not just a matter of breaking the chains and saying, okay, now you're free. It's a matter really of truly repairing the damage that has been done over time. And in the center of all of that, therefore, it has to be an educational process, relearning certainly our history, and then subsequent, relearning who we are as a people. And you have done such a magnificent job in terms of recording and showing us who we were as a people over time. And this is so central, and therefore this is such a pleasure for me to go forward with you in terms of this, podcast. And hopefully, why don't you tell us what you want to accomplish in terms of our discussion and the audience that we have.
Okay, well, my name is Robin Walker. I'm also known as the Black History Man. I'm part of a company, and our company is called The Black Secret. And our job is to pass on Black history content, Black heritage content, to build a sense of pride. And I also write books. I'm best known for a book called When We Rule, but I've written other books as well. And my job is very, very much to popularize Black history and African heritage with as many people as want to hear it. So when it comes to things like what is Black history, how does it work, what are the things that we need to know? These are the kinds of discussions that I do all the time. This is, if you like, my day job.
Wonderful, Robin. So, can you take us back to our roots? I mean, I know a little bit about history, and I remember being, so very much surprised to understand the prehistory, even before the written history of Kemet and our Nile Valley civilizations. And it's in a book by Charlotte de Lubitz, Sacred Science, where he quotes Herodotus and Manetho and many other people. That Kemet had a prehistory of 40,000 years before the first dynasty. Now, that's mind-boggling. 40,000 years, and most of us have been taught, if you will, that somehow history and civilization began with the Greeks and then the Romans. And of course, that's barely 2,000 years ago. Can you fill us in there?
Very simply, if we're looking at African achievements, the oldest achievements that we can definitely point to are from Central Africa, what Central Africans were doing 90,000 years ago. Certain fish hooks have been found, and these fish hooks were made by humans. And it's believed that Africans 90,000 years ago were engaged in fishing catfish. And because that's a seasonal fish, scholars have worked out that it was a planned activity of humans coming together to catch catfish 90,000 years ago. And those small bladelets represent a major advance in human technology 90,000 years ago. And the same types of hooks, people have found them across Africa and all the way into the Middle East, are from Central Africa to West Africa, from Central Africa to the Nile Valley. So you can make those kinds of connections. Then you've got things like what Africans were doing 43,000 years ago. There's a mine that was found in what used to be called Swaziland. Some people now call it Eswatini. And this mine, Africans were engaged in mining manganese 43,000 years ago. Then you have developments in Southern Africa. Some people say 37,000 years ago. A bone was found in Lebombo, it's only about this long, with notches carved into it, which you could read as 29 notches and 30 spaces, believed to represent the concept of 29 and a half, which is a lunar cycle. And so it shows that Africans 37,000 years ago in the Lebombo regions of South Africa were engaged in tracking lunar cycles and the cycle of a woman's menstrual cycle. So it's believed that women were responsible for the Lebombo bone. And this is the beginnings of mathematics. So there's many, many examples of very, very specific technological ideas that we can trace back to early Africa.
Greetings, my name is Robin Walker. I'm also known as the Black History Man. I am perhaps best known for my 2006 book, When We Ruled. Based on this book, I'm launching a new online history course aimed at you, the adults. You could be a parent, you could be a teacher, a mechanic, cleaner, professionals, care workers, security guards, taxi drivers, kitchen workers, entrepreneurs, tech heads, lawyers, all of you. We want people from all over the world to be empowered by our content. We want you to gain mastery over your history and heritage. And you can do this by subscribing to our course. Click on the link to get this powerful, life-changing material.
That's wonderful in and of itself. I think another thing that's important for us to point out, because to me again it's important for me as a person in terms of validating my own humanity, is that 200,000 years ago, Homo sapiens began in Africa, you know, whether it was with that lady in Ethiopia or further south, but certainly the anthropologists and the archaeologists have shown us this. And I think it's also important for people to understand, since Homo sapiens arose 200,000 years ago, it's in, let's say, northeastern Africa, if you will, or perhaps further south, Homo sapiens migrated not only across Africa, but around the world. And, you know, we are therefore the original people, and all other people come from us. And I say this, and I think it's of extreme importance to us, because, and again, there's genetic evidence to substantiate what we're talking about. There's one human species. But historically, what has happened with the distortion of history and certain assumptions by Europeans, different races have been identified as if to say we are from a different species. And you know, certainly I wish you would talk to that in terms of the beginning of humanity in Africa. Migration around the
there were scholars at the University of California, Berkeley, and they were the ones that discovered mitochondrial DNA. And then what they found was if you trace DNA, so you could trace it to find out who's descended from who, or you could find out who is ancestral to who. And the idea was then discovered that all humans are traceable to an African ancestress. And some of the books have tried to nickname her Eve, but that is really using a biblical name and sneaking that biblical name through the back door. And so a lot of scholars have said, no, well, it can't be Eve. Come on, let's be sensible here. But the paper came out, it was called Mitochondrial DNA in Human Evolution. And this was a paper that came out in 1987. And then from there, scholars have become more and more sure that indeed all humans are traceable to African ancestors. And the DNA evidence is very, very important. The other part of the story, of course, is when did people of non-African appearance appear? And it was originally thought that non-African appearances go back hundreds of thousands of years. And then the scholars have revised that to 20,000 years. And now they're actually revising it to less than 10,000 years. Mm. And so the genes responsible for skin lightening did not appear until the last 10,000 years. And so one time, every human on the planet Earth who was a Homo sapiens was indeed African complexioned. And so that means essentially that Black history isn't just Africa, it's also those Black people that left Africa and maintained their complexions before those complexions were altered by the presence of the skin lightening genes that appeared beginning 10,000 years ago.
I think basically what you're saying is that African history is human history. And we Indeed. Have to look at it from that perspective. And that's a perspective that, shall we say, is novel, in that the Europeans who have dominated the world to a large extent for the last 2,000 years, but certainly for the last 500 years. And then, of course, we know since the 1840s and so on and so forth, they've rewritten history. And you know, Martin Bernal has told us a lot about that in his books, whereby the ancient model, as he called it, was revised to give you this new European model, which came about in the late 18th century and 19th century in the universities of Europe, to justify the slave trade and to justify the barbarity against African people. So all of the previous history that had been recorded, again, by people like Herodotus and Manetho and Seychelles and so on, that went out the window. And this new revised version took front and center, as well as this whole business of language, as if to say language and written words started anywhere else but in Africa with the original people, and the whole business of science and civilization, again, all removed from Africa and placed in Greece and in Rome. As a matter of fact, whatever was attributed to Egypt, it was felt that Egypt somehow was not part of Africa. Egypt was either inhabited by people from outer space, or from Atlantis, or from Lemuria. I mean, could you speak to all of that obfuscation of the reality of history, of our history, and of course the history of the world, because it's turned the world upside down?
What you said there is very, very powerful, and to chew it off, it would take a long time to chew it up. But I'll give you a hint. I don't entirely agree with Bernal. You see, Bernard says at one time there was an ancient model, and then it was replaced by an Aryan model. My research says that while some of that happened, that wasn't the only thing that did happen. There were always scholars around that told the truth, but those scholars have been sidelined. And how European scholars have gone away with sidelining it is really, really interesting. So when Orientalism was founded, it was founded in the 18th century by the French scholars, people like Count de Volney, people like Monsieur Charles Dupuy. When those scholars came around, they admitted freely that ancient Africans, they called ancient Africans Ethiopians, they made it quite clear that Ethiopians are the people that started civilization and that these people were black-skinned and woolly-haired. They made that absolutely clear. When Egyptology was born, it was born, now Orientalism now split into Egyptology, it's split into Assyriology, and it's split into anthropology. And then you had the Egyptologists led by Jean-Francois Champollion, the first Egyptologist. He makes it quite clear, if you want to see the descendants of the ancient Egyptians, go to the Nubian populations. He calls them present-day inhabitants of Nubia, and not to the Copts. And so in Egypt, you've got the Copts, who their language is closest to the ancient Egyptian, but they're actually very, very mixed. But you've also got the Nubians as well, and the Nubians are largely black. And Champollion said it's the Nubians you should be looking to if you want to find the descendants of the ancient Egyptians. Now, the result is Champollion's work has never been translated out of the French into the English. So that was how they dealt with him. And the only way that we know that Champollion said that is because Diop quotes it, and because Diop's book has now been translated into English, we now know that that's what Champollion said. Then you had Assyriology. Assyriology is now the study of the Middle East, Sumer, Elam, Akkadian, Babylonia, Chaldea. And the father of that discipline is General Sir Henry Rawlinson. And I've got his stuff. And it's all quotable. He says the first inhabitants were Cushites. And then he says what he means negative. Yeah. And so when it came to who the Sumerians were, General Sir Henry Rawlinson, the father of the discipline, he made it clear. And what's then happened is, of course, none of his stuff has been reprinted since the 19th century. So that's how they dealt with him. Then you had now the birth of physical anthropology, and physical anthropology now came out with people like, what's his name? Researches into the physical history of man.
Not Petrie?
It wasn't Petrie. This was before Petrie. Researches into the physical history of man. James Howells Pritchard.
Okay.
Pritchard. Not only does he say the human race is of Negro origin, he says, and I'm quoting now, and I know of no other argument from the other side.
Wow.
Yeah. And Pritchard, he goes into ancient Egypt. As far as he's concerned, they're Negroes. He goes into ancient India. They're also Negroes. The book is a bombshell. And the book came out in 1813, I seem to remember. And so what then happened is so scholars had to find a way of dealing with Champollion. Simple. Don't translate the stuff. They had to find a way of dealing with Rawlinson. Simple. Don't reprint the stuff. And they were able to do this so that they could fabricate what Bernal calls the Aryan model. But it wasn't because scholars at the University of Germany won the argument. They never won the argument. All they did was bury the original stuff. And so what happens is then they were able to create a lie that says, if you want to learn Black history, don't read any of the 19th century stuff, it's all racist. On the contrary, the 19th century stuff tells a lot more truth than the 20th century stuff.
As a thank you for visiting our website, we are giving you a free copy of our exclusive 100 Black History Facts, which is in fact a taster of our course content. Make sure you leave your email address and we will send it right to you. We hope it inspires you to dig deeper into your history and heritage.
It's a pattern that repeats itself. Currently, as you know, there are Arabs in Egypt who are claiming that Egyptian civilization is theirs. And as you know, what's his name, DeSantis in Florida here in the United States is saying that don't read anything about Black people because that's not relevant. So what happened in the 18th century, 19th century, et cetera, is going on in the 21st century.
Absolutely true. Absolutely true. Yeah, let me say something about that. I've heard that there are some Arab Egyptians wanting to do a lawsuit against Shonda Rhimes, something to do with they're upset about the portrayal of Cleopatra.
Yes.
And what I say to those Arab Egyptians, if you're watching this, bring it on. Bring it on. You're going to lose. Are people pretending to be ancient Egyptians when they set foot in that country December 639 AD, pretending to be ancient Egyptians? Not even BC, AD.
And that's so well documented. I can't imagine why they're trying to, well, I shouldn't say that because then you have the mindset of the DeSantis, as if to say, slavery didn't happen, Black history, the history of Black people doesn't matter, you just throw it out the window and you recreate your own truth. And this is the whole thing with the mindset, as my dad said, we have to liberate our minds from mental slavery because, while others will help you free the body, you can break the chains, but unless you break the chains around your mind, you're still going to be enslaved by a process that has been enslaving your minds, for centuries. And in doing that, it's also altered the course of civilization, their civilization, in a sense, which has become dominant because it's so far away from the truth. And now anytime something is shall we say, discovered, it's as if to say it's something new and it was never there before. When, so many of the ancient civilizations did all these things, millennia before, whether it's in Africa or in India or in Asia and China and so on. And so we have this distortion. And I think that is what is destroying the world and leading it astray. And I think that unless the history of Africa is righted, because as we said at the top of the hour, that African history is world history. So unless that is righted, then the world is headed certainly for a catastrophe because it's carrying out a lie, and it's not only carrying out a lie historically. I think it continues to validate a way of looking at reality that is a materialistic approach, and that has led us to scientific materialism. It has led us to nuclear weaponry. It is leading us to artificial intelligence, of which all of these things have the potential to destroy not just nature but our humanity, and both actually. And because of this one-sided approach to reality, which is a physical approach, a materialistic approach, the five senses, there is no balance in terms of understanding the reality that you can't have matter without spirit. There's no such thing as mass without energy. I mean, Einstein showed them that, E equals mc squared. And now quantum physics has shown them that consciousness is primary. Consciousness is what moves everything. And so there's no longer any basis for their scientific material, which produced the Industrial Revolution, which has been, using up the resources of the world and producing all of the gases, etc., the CO2 and the methane, and elevating the temperature.